Well, good afternoon. I'm here to teach you on writing a business plan, either to raise capital or to build your business by bootstrapping. I like to think you can build your business without raising capital. However, all the things you do to do that will help you raise capital. So it's a good process to be in. I love this picture because it's so perfect for the place we're in. So let's just say the cheese is what you want. This is the investment you're looking for. The trap is probably going to be the investor of some kind that most people are very afraid of. This is you, the mouse. You're looking for the cheese. I'm in the helmet business. So I help you not get smacked by the rat trap when you get the cheese. So that's what I'm about. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, and there's a number of questions, and I love this picture of Walt Disney. I understand that Walt Disney pitched Disneyland about 600 times to get about 35 investors to make this thing a reality. And the idea is that you think about pitching the vision of your business, right? Here he is. Imagine, here's this guy. You're standing on a hill. He's looking out over, a grove of orange trees saying, okay, now look, there's going to be this big mountain with a roller coaster in it. There's going to be a big swamp and a jungle. There's going to be Tomorrowland. There's going to be Fantasyland. There's going to be a main street. There's going to be an electrical parade with a bunch of cartoon characters that I've made. And there's going to be a monorail around it and a hotel and a giant parking lot. Will you invest? Well, Walt, I think you're certifiable, buddy. But obviously he pulled it off. But this is one of those things where you look at an orange grove and he could see that. And that is what he was selling investors. And the questions that I find that come up oftentimes are, well, how much money should I raise? What's my deal worth? Because investors will always ask you, the reason you want to know what the deal is worth is because when they invest the money, what percentage of the business do they get? So what I'm going to talk about this, and I'll say this again, the better deal you do on your business plan, you're building a case for your valuation of your business. So when they invest, you don't have to give up too much of your company. So, but the thing is, we're going to build your business as much as you can without investors, which I think is also doable. So part of the question is, how much of your company are you going to have to give up? How do you keep control? We've all heard the horror stories of the entrepreneur being thrown out of their own company. And Steve Jobs comes to mind. How can I motivate investors, and what can I do to best position myself for investors? So how do we do all that stuff? So first, the button. And I was just recently in Dubai, and so here's the before and after picture of Dubai. This is Dubai in 1990, not very long ago, and you should see it now. It's just out of this world. It's Tomorrowland. And it was just crazy, just all these buildings. It's like architects got blank checks and said, build me something cool. And they did. And they're still building. So let's talk about some of the investors here first, just to give you an idea. Venture capitalists, they get a foot-high pile of business plans every day. Just picture that. And part of what they do is they only invest in maybe, out of thousands of deals they see every year, they've invested maybe a handful. So it's about a lot of money putting into a business. It's got to be a home run. They figure if they bet on 20, one of them's got to make enough money to recover all the cash they lost on the other 19. And often they win with that. And so these guys are also being compared, and there's sites and magazines and organizations that compare how well they're doing, because the guys who invest in there, give them the money to invest, want to invest with a VC firm who does a better job with the money. So they've got to do a good job with the money. So they're between a rock and a hard place too. It's not like these guys just writing checks and, if they don't like you, they don't like you and you get upset with them. No, they're playing a game too, and they're in business. And they have limited partners who are the ones who give them the checks, like CalPERS, the California State Teachers Union, and employees, all of those kind of big money goes into these investors. And so what happens, you'll hear these deals with these venture capitalists, and so just raised $50 million at $1 billion valuation, whatever. There's the terms and conditions that are in these deals that we don't hear about. So there's lots of things in those deals. I'm not. That's a whole talk in itself. But just understand there are some terms and conditions, and a lot of them are very onerous. It isn't easy just getting $50 million for a business, or even $1 million for a business. There's some gotchas in the deal. So that's just keep that in mind. Angel investors, on the other hand, this is from a survey. Typically, they're middle-aged men. Look at us, middle-aged man. There's me, there's my buddy who's a middle-aged guy. They have MBAs, they invest locally. They invest in something that really appeals to them personally. So it could be something like a medical device that you have that they could actually benefit from. and they have the expertise, and they typically invest within about 25 to 50 miles of where they are, and they want to participate in your business in some way, whether they're on your board, as an advisor, perhaps as an employee, like they want to buy into your business, because they want to help. They get it. And so this, in a way, is smart money. So think about that. And one of the things I tell people as they write a business plan, think also they need reading glasses. We're all wearing reading glasses. So your minimum typeface is 11 point. The fact that they're MBA and are educated, you cannot afford to have typos or bad grammar in your plan. So if you're going to appeal to these guys, there are a lot of basic things that are just unacceptable if you make those mistakes. So it's got to be big enough to read, and it's got to make sense. You've got to have good grammar and good spelling. So simple things. So I would teach a business plan class at this organization. I taught there for about 10 years. And one of the things you would always ask the participants, so you'd ask them about their business, and you'd say, well, what do you need next? And invariably they'd say, I need capital. I've got to have capital, And I'd say, well, do you have a business plan? Do you have a board of advisors? Do you have any customers? And they'd say, well, no. And they were really just plain unprepared, but in their mind, they thought they needed money next. Money was all they needed, and they'd be off to the races. And they were nowhere near prepared for the money. In fact, they would just embarrass themselves if they went and talked to somebody to write them a check, because they wouldn't even do it. And then they think, well, why are you so stupid you'd ask me for the money when you're not even ready? And it makes it even worse and harder for them to come back. So I want to address that, because here, when you do everything I tell you to do here, you will be ready to ask for money if you need it. Although if you do the things I suggest, you might not. So the other trick, of course, is what thing can you do to inspire an investor to write you a check sooner? How do you do that? So, because they don't have to. They could spend their money going on vacation. They don't have to invest in your deal. They've got the money. They don't need to do anything with it. Although I will say, you find that what happens is, since so many of them have lost a fortune in the stock market and in other places, the real estate market hasn't done well, so where are they going to put their money? So investing in a small business like your idea is actually one of the best bets, because they've been doing very well lately. Come on, thing. Need new technology here. So I guess it's time here to say, so what's a nice guy like me doing in a business like this? In fact, even investors are going to ask you, what's a nice person like you doing in a business like yours? Because they want to know, what's your motivation? More than just, oh, I want the money. They want to know, have some other ideas of why are you in this? Is there some other personal interest? And this, my background, herding cows on motorcycles, that was for fun, really. My grandparents had a farm in Virginia, and they had a neighbor who had cows, and he was paying me $1.25 an hour plus gas to ride my motorcycle to help him herd cows. Probably the funnest job I've had. Anyway, I graduated from UC Santa Barbara. The Auto Exchange was a do-it-yourself used car lot. I'm in Santa Barbara when I did it, on Figueroa and Chapala Street, where All American Sporting Goods was, in their parking lot on Sundays. And I would run these classified ads that say, come down, rent a space and sell your car. And I'd run radio commercials, and I'd wake up on Sunday morning to hear myself on the radio saying, hey, come on down to my car lot and sell your car, and come look at the cars. And I thought of it as the best combination of kind of like classifieds for your cars with a used car lot, but you're buying the car from the person who owned the car. So that was better. I worked for TI, for Texas Instruments, selling electronic components. I've sold workshops, word processors, and I was a catalog copywriter and also the electronics buyer for the Sharper Image catalog. And then since then, it's been pretty much Jian Software for the last 27 years, which I didn't really expect it to go that long. I thought I'd sell it or do something, but I'm still doing it. And every time I'm tempted by something else, I think, wait a minute, this is the best business in the world to be in. It's downloadable. I can update things. I don't have to have inventory, lots of people. It's just easy. But the real question I had, way back when, what I also want to say, in a number of the different jobs I've had, like I've worked for small companies and large companies, I've been laid off, I've been fired, companies have been closed. I know what it's like to be unemployed. And so, but my real success started when I started my own business. And that was really the turning point for me. But one of the questions I wonder about way back when, I remember in Popular Science, it had to be, I don't know how many years ago, 50 years ago, that could be that long, when I was a teenager. They had, I think it was a 300 mile per gallon carburetor. And they talked about it, it worked, and they tested it, but where did it go? I mean, where did all this stuff go? There's all these things in Popular Science that I still wonder what the heck happened to them. They just, did they make it? And when I worked for companies in Silicon Valley, I could see why they didn't make it. They'd have legal problems, they were undercapitalized, marketing snafus, all kinds of stuff could go wrong. And so what I did is I created some software. I just thought, it started out where I helped a friend write a business plan. He had a software company. And Apple Computer wanted to buy his software. It was an electronic design software product. And they needed a business plan because they're worried at the time that if they bought his software, and they're going to really build the engineering department around this, if they bought his software and he went out of business, how are they going to get updates? How are they going to be able to continue to use this software if there wasn't somebody to support it? So we wrote a business plan for him, and he got the deal. And of course, that's when I really learned about business plans. But I saw the business plan, and still kind of do, see it as an elaborate brochure to sell your business concept to an investor. But investors ask a lot of questions. It's like when I sold word processors in the past. You sell one aspect of the word processor to the secretary. You sell another aspect of the word processor to the office manager. You sell another aspect of the word processor to the chief financial officer. And if you talk to the CEO or somebody else, you sell them another aspect of it. And so the same thing with business plans. People ask, well, what's the most important part? Well, all the parts are important because different people, different experts who've been asked to look at it are going to look at different parts of the plan and say, what about the marketing? What about the engineering? What about the finance? And so you have to have all these things thought about. And in this case, for your business, you're the investor. It's your money you're spending. So, you want to get this right. And Buckminster Fuller said, a mistake in the plan you can correct with an eraser. A mistake in the field requires a checkbook. So I think it's good advocacy for writing a plan. So I put in all this stuff, the narrative, the financial models. I put a pitch deck in this. We've sold a couple of million copies of this by now. It's been since 1988. That's when the first one came out. It was just a straight Word template with just the narrative of the plan. And you'd cut and paste and put in your company name and fill it in and edit the blanks, fill in the sentences, complete the sentences. And people have raised, well, I don't know how many billions have been raised so far, but typically they raise anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, even $50 million. I've got one customer who's raised over $90 million. So it's about, I come back to this over and over again, it's about building your case. If it gets to investors, you're making a case for them to write you a check because lots of people want money and they've got lots of options. So you want to have your deal at the top. You don't have any mistakes and you want to have your deal be the most compelling. Now here's my favorite example of a customer, and this is where a lot of my talk is based on. So here's a guy, he wrote a business plan. He's a young jet jockey, 26 years old, had about 7 or 8 or 9 buddies. They wanted to buy some Learjets because they wanted to start a jet charter service based out of Hayward, California. They're going to fly organ transplants and people and movie stars and do all that kind of stuff. And he was looking for about $3.5 million to buy some jets, a couple of jets. I guess you can get a couple of Learjets for that back then. But anyway, the investors thought, this really isn't that compelling. How can he scale this? How does this become a big business? Long story short, he finds a guy who owns 2 Learjets, shows him the plan, and the guy says, well, my airplanes would be much better off if you're managing them than where they are now. Take my airplanes. What just happened there? Did the guy need to raise $3 or $4 million to buy jets and then pay that money back or sell half of his business or most of his business to get that money? No, he got 2 airplanes, I won't say for free, but for free pretty much. And that just changed everything. How much money does he need to raise now? $50,000? I mean, just for uniforms and an office and some marketing and stuff like that. He no longer needs the $3 or $4 million. So my point here is, what I want to talk about throughout this is, how can you find somebody with 2 Learjets with your plan that can give you what you want? You don't need cash, you need the thing you want, and that's the point. So part of this is your perspective, and I think of, this is technically in your brain, it's called the reticular activating system. What I mean by that is that phenomena that happens when you buy a new car, for example. Isn't that when you suddenly start seeing that car everywhere? You see it, oh yeah, now I see them everywhere. I never saw them before, but now that I have one, it's everywhere. So we want to tune your mind, tune the radar in your head to seeing these kinds of opportunities. I think that's what I want my intention to have come out of here. So part of it is what is your intention? Are you going to make something happen? Or are you going to recognize something that's already happening? So you'll see those opportunities out there, and I'll show you a bunch of opportunities in here. Because we don't want you to have to use cash when you don't have to. And this is one of the things that dazzles investors as well, because they'll always ask you, well, couldn't you do this without as much money? Do you really need that much money? And more often than not, you don't. So here's my example. I sent out an email to my own customer base. Say, I'm thinking of taking all of my downloadable Windows apps and templates and building them into an integrated website online that people can subscribe to, software as a service, as they say in the software business. And so how do you know, how much money do I need to raise to do that? And I thought, I sent an email to my customers and I said, you know, who of all people, you've used my software, you get what it does. And many of you have mentioned to me over the phone that it'd be great if you had a dashboard where you could just punch a button and get the next product and have access to all of them. And if the data and everything was integrated between the products, kind of like Microsoft Office integrates Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, but like Cliff Notes for Business with all the information you need. Anyway, I got about 250 responses, and one of them was Fran Tarkenton's chief financial officer, who said, you know, we got your email, we've kind of thought of you as a competitor all these years, but we've invested a couple of $1 million building a system that sounds an awful lot like what you want to do. Why don't you come talk to us? And I thought, wow, yeah, it's off the shelf. Long story short, I did that deal. A year later, we ended the deal, we reversed it. So I licensed his technology. So now I have my business plan online, and I have a copy of Tarkenton's software, and he's doing something else, and I've got my system, and I'm building it out with all my apps in it. And so there I am. Oh, but in the process of thinking about and doing this deal, I talked to their programmers, and I said, if I came to you guys with a, he uses an outside programming contracting firm, and I said, if I had a blank sheet of paper and they had this idea for doing this whole project, what would it take? And they said it would take about 3 years and about $2.5 million. And the deal I did, I pay a royalty, and I can buy the royalty out for a reasonable fee whenever I want to. But it enabled me to have a $2.5 million head start on a software project that if I couldn't have that, I'd have to go out and raise the money and convince investors who didn't know me. Anyway, it just would be a lot of work. This was infinitely easier to do it this way. So how do you do that? So part of it is, some basic questions like, so why are you in this business and what do you want to do? Your school business could be one of these things. How do you want to do this? So what service do you want to be in? What are your customers like? How are you going to reach them? And we're going to go through all this quickly here in this. I'm trying to do this in about 40 minutes altogether. If I get my button thing to work. So, but why not write a business plan? I hear people, I say several things I want to say in this whole thing here, but of course the time you want to map is before you enter the woods. That's what it really is about. I mean, a business plan is like your roadmap. It's like a movie script. It's like, it's all of that. And you need to have this you want a 10,000 foot view to figure out what are you going to do in this business and see all the moving parts before you start spending money and trying to put this whole thing together. But I also want to say something where I hear people say this a lot in our culture. Hey, why not? Why didn't you do this? Why not do that? And really all that begs is a bunch of excuses. I mean, what are you literally asking for? Why not? I don't care why you don't do something. I want to know what it's going to take for you to do something. But anyway, so why not write a business plan? Well, it's too hard. I don't know how. What do I say? It's going to be outdated. Well, I've beaten all that by having software that answers all these questions. It makes it easy, fast, simple, and answers all these questions. And you can update it all you want. And so there's a zillion uses for a business plan. I've listed, how many did I list here? 14. Anyway, I say 101, being generous. But the main one I listed for the first person is yourself, because it's for you. It's so you know what's going on in your business. You've thought it through. It's your money you're going to spend. It's the next 3, 4, 5 years of your life that you're going to do something with. So you really want to think about this whole thing. And the rest of them, I think, are fairly straightforward. Angels, banks, hiring your people, or having an employment review. You got a marketing person and say, here's the business plan. Have you achieved the marketing we said we were going to do in the plan? Yes or no? If not, you really got to let them go, unless you're running a clinic, in which case they should be paying you to work there. So I'm not running a clinic. I want people to do what I need done. And the beauty of the software and a business plan, you can get people to contribute, and they can weigh in, and they can actually be part of it. So it's not like you have to tell them what to do, and then they have to buy in on it. They're already in on it. They want to do this thing. And so you're helping it, making it easy. And it's just a lot of good reasons. Now, this is a screen capture from my Windows app version. You can see all the sections of the plan we cover, and this is expert commentary. This is invisible text in Word, and so it doesn't print. You can even, with this button here, you can turn this off, and it's just black text. And so text is already there. So, and you simply, your company name fills in automatically. You make some choices here on what you want to say. You can edit it, and you can just change it. It's pretty straightforward. I say it's easier to edit than it is to write from scratch. but that gives you a glimpse of how I approach it. If you get the business plan from the SBA or some of these free ones from banks, you're going to see this, and this is going to be, you'll have this title here, and this will be blank, because they don't tell you how to say anything. They don't do anything for you. So, which is useless. Now the big mistake, this is a mistake mostly engineers make who write business plans, is they spend all this time telling you about the product, selling the product, selling the product. I had a guy give me a business plan. It was practically as thick as a phone book. And it was all these technical specs. And it turns out, ironically enough, it was simply a machine for crushing cans. And I thought, do I really need all these technical specs for crushing a can? Of course not. It could have been done in a 5-page business plan. But the idea, the difference here is they don't want to buy your Coke, they want to buy a Coke machine. Big difference. And that the plan is about how does this work? How does this sell lots of these? Sure, they want to taste the Coke. Sure, you've got to, give them an idea of what the product does and how it works. I would go through a whole long thing here where the engineers want to talk about torque and axle this and that and loading and horsepower and all that kind of stuff. And really, all the investor, most of us just want to know, show me park, reverse, neutral, drive, take it for a test drive. This is easy, I get it. Nevertheless, you want to show what's the value to the customer, some information, just simple about what does this do, how does it work, and who else is doing it. You also want to admit that you've got competition. A lot of people say we've got no competition, but that's really revealing that you're naive. You've got competition. A tennis court contractor's got competition not only with a swimming pool or a roof, but they're competing with your new car, your European vacation. So, you're competing with all kinds of different things, whether they're a direct competitor or otherwise, but you need to think about all of that kind of stuff. And one way to get some market research to really figure out if you've got something here, pretty straightforward. You just go into Google and you type in some keywords and you see how many people searched on those keywords. This is great proof to put in a business plan. It tells me that I should make a product for a government grant because it's 10 times some of the other stuff in here. And so just give you some ideas of what the real demand is, how many people are really looking for what it is you make. And this would be a great thing for really all of us to do. And then the real trick, of course, is how do you reach the customers? I recommend in the marketing section that you get a catalog of mailing lists. Because if you can buy a list, if you made a boat anchor, you could buy a mailing list of all the people who own sailboats, all the people who own, whatever kind of boat, and sell it and reach them. Now, maybe more people own than that, but the point is you've got to reach them. How do you get in front of these people? So can you leverage retail stores, obviously online, and all these other ways of doing it? OEM is the original equipment manufacturer. It's like Goodyear sells tires to Chevrolet. So, you'd be selling your tires to Chevrolet, something like that. And how do you become a priority? And then this comes into some of the strategic alliance stuff here where, I started my business in a garage. Hewlett-Packard started in a garage. But if you don't have a garage, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Can you get space from people? I see space available all over the place. And every month that goes by without being rented, the money's going down the drain. Maybe you can make a deal with these guys. Maybe you can get the office and retail space you need. They want to do something. Sitting there empty, getting nothing is worthless. Maybe they'll take stock in your company or your product and trade, kind of like crowdfunding. So anyway, it's just a better deal. And the other thing, So I know guys they started a beer company. They thought they had to get a brewery, build a brewery. They didn't. I think they went to Budweiser. They sent over the recipe for their beer. They stuck the recipe in the computer that runs the brewery, and they would run 1,000 cases of beer, and they used their bottles. All my guys needed to bring was the recipe on disc, and I think a roll of labels for the bottles. And they used the existing beer company's bottles and the whole system, and it ran through 1,000 cases of beer in a couple of hours. And they got their beer went away, and they didn't have to build a brewery. All they needed was the formula and the labels, and poof, they got beer. Likewise, having a newspaper, I had a newspaper print a catalog for me. Why would you go out and buy your own trucks when UPS or FedEx can deliver for you? I hear people, they want to buy their building. No, you don't need to spend your money on that at all. And so the idea is you need some of the way you do this is you think strategically like these partners are going to be, like Tarkenton. He wanted to use my stuff. We did a deal. It worked out. The guy with the Learjets, he just wanted to get someone, chartering his jets. And so my guy had just a better deal for paying him for chartering his jets. So that's what we're looking for, is some kind of strategic alignment with these people. The other, I was going to say that they don't see very many business plans either. They don't see this kind of deal very much. A venture capitalist is used to seeing business plans. Angels, they look at these things. They scrutinize them. They're very picky. They know all the gory details. These other partners, they're not really worried about that. That's not what they're in for. They just want to know how can they make money with doing some kind of deal with you. And they're motivated. So the other thing here is you've heard in real estate management, real estate, it's location, location, location. Well, in your business, it's management, management, management. So you want to have your team of people, that you have around you be obviously the best you can get. But one of the things, so as investors look at this, you could have a grade B idea, but a grade A team is going to be better than a grade A idea and a grade B team. They bet on the jockey more than they bet on the horse. And so, of course, this is the part where you really want to, you're selling the team. You got to sell a team. You're selling the team to yourself, being very careful. I mean, we've all worked with employees who've been problematic that you got to give them the boot. And really you want to, I don't want to go into, that's a whole separate rabbit hole, but the management team is critical for all this stuff. And so I was thinking, I was on a panel where it was a business plan competition. I was on this panel with a half a dozen venture capitalists and me, and there was a team of guys from, I think it was some university in the South, and they had this golf course thing. And they were all, young guys, white guys, wearing t-shirts, they all looked alike. This is when Tiger Woods was reigning supreme. And I had to ask them, I said, guys, you all look alike. What happened? You don't have anybody of color, you've got no women, you've got nobody with any gray hair. You don't have any of these people to weigh in on, how they perceive how your product's going to work. What's up with that? And so, one way of addressing that is to simply have them be on your board of advisors. It just would have been better if they had a team that was a little more diverse. And they made another mistake too. The CEO said, "Well, I'm going to be the chief financial officer. We don't have one, so I'm going to get one of those." He was kind of really embarrassed about that. And it really doesn't matter because you can find one of those. You don't have to have your full team assembled for an investor, but think about it for yourself. Like, who are you going to hire? Howard Schultz, in his book, Pour Your Heart Into It, about Starbucks, what I love what he said, he says, you got to find people, he had to find people who have a passion for coffee and the coffee experience. You don't work at Starbucks unless you have a passion for coffee and the coffee experience, period. So in your case, what kind of people do you have to have a passion for in your company? And that's what you're looking for. The other question I hear a lot is, well, okay, so if I take an investment, how do I keep control of my company? I'm gonna get thrown out. Because you hear about it all the time. The entrepreneur, the inventor, the engineer who builds this company, it gets to a certain point, and then the investors want to throw them out. Well, how do you do that? Well, I think of a baseball game where you've watched a baseball game, and the pitcher's pitching, and if he's striking people out, he stays on the pitcher's mound, right? But all of a sudden, guys start hitting off him. They hit home runs off him, and if they start losing the game, what happens? The team manager comes out of the dugout with the catcher. They walk up on the mound, and they're all standing there. Hey, you're blowing it. Can you still pitch? Maybe we should make a change. And often they do. Now let's say that manager doesn't make the change. He just leaves that pitcher out there pitching, and the guy's throwing lousy pitches, and they're hitting off him, and the team loses. What happens next? The owner, or the president, however that works, looks at the manager and says, this manager's got to go, because that manager didn't go out there and replace the pitcher. So it just kind of works upstream. So if you think about this, you choose your team. If your team is failing, it's up to you to replace your team. Otherwise, you're going to get replaced. So that's how you maintain control of your company. You keep succeeding and you keep fixing it, and so you don't have to get replaced, because that's what's going to happen to you. Because again, VCs have their people looking over their shoulder, because if they lose the money in their investments, they can't go out and raise another fund next year. And then they're in trouble. So they're going to fire you so they don't get fired by the other guys. It just works uphill. So the other big question is, okay, if I'm going to raise money, how much do I need to raise? Well, typically where your business at, if it's a startup, it's at its lowest valuation ever. So what you want to do is you want to raise enough money. The theory goes like this. You want to raise enough money to get to the next milestone. So upon achieving that milestone, your business has, a bigger valuation, 2x, 5x, 10x, whatever it was. So it might be you need to build, like I have here, build the working prototype. So the next business plan or the next pitch is, hey, we've got the working prototype, we can levitate, anti-gravity is working, now we need more money to, to get the patent and do some marketing and hiring some people. But if you didn't have a working prototype, you wouldn't be able to dazzle the investors for the next level. Does that make sense? And then go from there to the next thing, a patent. In fact, an issued utility patent adds about $1 million in valuation to your business. So is it worth getting $50,000? So if you go to an investor and say, I need $50,000 or $100,000 to get an issued utility patent, and I'll give you X amount of the company now, and now when that utility patent's issued, the business is worth an extra $1 million. That's a pretty good return on investment for $50,000 to $100,000. So, and these are all different examples. It could be a production run, it could be growing your operation, something like that, or you're in one store and now you want to go out and have, we want to build 100 more stores. So these are the kind of things you want to raise money to reach a milestone so that the next request for money is going to be at a valuation that's much higher. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we do this? Again, I've said this before, you're building a case. You're building a case for raising the money what the business is worth. Because, for example, this part here, what I'm talking about, let's say you have a pre-money valuation of $9 million. The company's worth $9 million now. An investor gives you $1 million. Now the business is worth $10 million. Your 9 plus their 1. That means the investor gets 10% of your business. For their $1 million on your 9. Does that make sense? So next thing around, when you get your patents and a couple of other things, your business is worth $20 million. That investor is going to give you another $1 million, but they're only going to get 5%. They're not going to get 10% of your business for $1 million at $20 million. Does that make sense? So what you're doing is you're building value with the money they invest. And that's the idea. So that tells you, it helps you calculate the pre-money valuation, how many shares you're going to sell or what the stock give up is going to be. And what's said here is kind of not showing well, but it says rounds 1 through 5 and plus an initial public offering. And that all based on the valuation. And so what I've done here is in the spreadsheet, we've put in a Harvard model for calculating valuation. Up this part of the spreadsheet you can't see shows your year 1 through 5 revenue, profit, cash flow, all that stuff. And from those numbers, we can calculate the Harvard model, the discounted cash flow model. This is the first Chicago method where you've got several different variations that all come together where 50% on this version, 30 and 20, this adds up to 100%, but there are different variations of it. There's a weighted average, a discounted cash flow, a VC method, and we average them all 4 different valuation methods to come up with a number. And that really takes us actually back to the previous screen where you've got the investor analysis. All that valuation is plugged in here, and if this investor puts in $1 million, what does it look like over several rounds of funding? And it's complicated stuff, but we show you the math. We do it all for you. You just fill in a few numbers, and it tells you this stuff. And you can show this to the investors. They can follow it. You don't have to be a mathematician. I'm more of probably a right brain artist type, believe it or not. I made this thing so I could understand the deal. I wanted to know, is it worth raising money? How much money am I going to be worth? How much money is the investor going to get? That's really what they want to know. And I wanted to see how all this worked because it's complicated. But we wanted to make a model that was really pretty simple to use. And I have these little tabs across the bottom to show how this Excel worksheet works. But that's really what you get with the product. Now, one thing I want to say about investors, even though we're talking about how to do all the right things, so if and when we wanted and needed an investor, we'd be in the best place possible. In the meantime, we're succeeding without investors. Nevertheless, a lot of us, and I'll say for myself too, have been scared to go, I don't want to talk to investors, oh God, But these guys are praying to their God for some kind of deal that will walk in the door. Hopefully it's you will walk in with something worth investing in. And the next thing I'm going to say, this is what a guy told me I was up in Silicon Valley, is show me something I can believe. And that's what your business plan is about. That's the case you're building. This is all the part you're doing all that little detail to find out. You're getting the keyword search in there. You've got jets. You've got all this stuff, and you've done all this work, and that's what they want to see what you've done because that gives you the competitive advantage. And what's going to inspire them to write a check to you sooner than later, because you're going to do it. You're showing them you're going to do this thing anyway. It doesn't matter. The train is leaving, and if they're going to get on it and make some money on your deal, they have to invest. So that's what motivates them to go get into it. And so one of the questions I like to ask people, and I do this in a sales context a lot, rather than saying, are you interested? Yes or no, or asking any kind of yes or no question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? 8, 9? They might say I'm a 6. And of course you can say, well, okay, what do I need to do to make it a 10 for you? So it's just a different conversation, because if you ask yes or no, that's a hard question to answer because it's so cut and dry. But in 1 to 10, people can respond to that. So I think that's just an interesting way of addressing that. The other thing I want to say here about talking to investors, and I keep the same picture up, is you never want to tell them, people show their financial model. Can we tweak this thing here somehow, or is it? Anyway, it says these numbers are conservative. You put these financial models together and say, these are conservative. The investors are going to cut the thing down to a tenth of what you said anyway. And then here's this other one. What it says is, if we got 1% of the market, if I could take those Cokes and go to China and get 1% of the China market, we'd all be rich. Well, 1% just means you really haven't done the math. Maybe you would get 1%. In my case, there's 388 million businesses in the world. I'd like to sell, 1 million subscribers at $50 a month. I mean, that's some real money. But 1 million subscribers out of 388 is only 0.26%. It sounds much better to say 0.26% than the proverbial 1%. Everybody says 1%. That's why it's just so dull and it's a useless number. On the other hand, people say, we don't want you to have 1%. We think you should have 50% of the market or 80% of the market. I mean, Microsoft Windows at one point was 80% of the market. So 1% is horribly, it's just, you don't ever want to say it. You want to think about it, what number you're really going after. And then the other one I thought was really interesting, again, goes back to the time when I was on this panel for a business plan competition. Every one of them came out and said, yeah, and in our first year, we're going to do $1 million. And about the time the break, I said to the VCs, I said, is it me or is everybody do $1 million in their first year? And they all laughed and said, you'd be blown away at how many people come into our office and give us a pitch and tell us we're going to do $1 million in the first year. You've got to think about how much $1 million the first year is every single day. I forget the number, but you can figure that out. But it's really unrealistic to expect to do $1 million in the first year. How much is it?
3.
What? No, $1 million in the first year. No, divided by 244 work days, it's more than that. So anyway, these are just 3 things makes you sound like, it just diminishes you. You just lose credibility by uttering any of these 3 things. Okay, so now it brings us, now we're ready for the elevator. The funny thing about the elevator pitch, we think, oh, it's a 30-second pitch. And I was at an event somewhere and they said, oh, there was a person on stage talking about the elevator pitch. And she goes, well, imagine you're in a building, it's 26 stories and you're in the elevator. I'm thinking, whoa, you're in Santa Barbara. There's nothing 26 stories in this town, 8 tops, right? But think about it, really, it's 3 floors. You got 3 floors to make your point. And so what you're looking for is you're making a statement. Do you realize there's 388 million businesses in the world? And none of them know what most of them, and 4 out of 5 of them go out of business, and that's kind of becomes my pitch, But the idea is, and the way this works to get attention from an investor is, you give them the elevator pitch, the 30-second spiel wherever you are. It could be in line at a buffet somewhere at an event. But you give them that pitch, they say, yeah, I'm interested. Do you have a summary business plan? It's a 2-page plan, you give them that, or you mail it to them right away, or email it to them right away. Then you get an appointment to go there and give them a PowerPoint pitch, basically kind of like this on your deal. And then if they're interested, of course they're going to ask you lots of questions. If they're interested, then they're going to want the formal full-blown business plan. The way to get there from here is completely backwards. You got to start with a full-blown business plan because that gives you the chance to look at the whole thing from 10,000 feet, connect all the dots. You don't want to end up like the communications company up in Silicon Valley that had the whole thing done, except they couldn't get the last 50 feet to the house. There was just somehow legally, politically, some way, they couldn't connect the box in the street to the home. And everything else was useless. So you have to be able to connect the dots all the way to the finished result. And so anyways, you write the whole business plan, you reduce it to the summary plan, you reduce it to the PowerPoint pitch, and then you extract out of that a 30-second pitch that answers these questions. And then you're really ready to talk to investors about it. Plus, it's a great thing you need to know to be able to talk to anybody, even if you stand up in a breakfast group and say, hey, what are you about? You got 30 seconds to say it. And that's really the big thing. So as Henry Ford said, hustle while you wait. So what can you do while you're looking for investors or building this business? Back to what I wish these people would have told me at the conference when I asked them, what do you need next? They could be saying, well, I need a board of advisors and some directors. Would you be on my board? I've got some customers. I need to put together some letters of intent. I've got some contracts with customers. I've got partnerships I got a guy with Learjets. And I've got, boats and a dock, and I got a warehouse. I've got a working prototype that I can get a patent or a trademark on. And I've got some distribution deals. I've got my software in Ingram's warehouse or at Walmart or something like that. So these are things you can get, you can do. They don't cost you anything. You don't need investment money to make those happen. And so the thing is, what you're trying to do to be ready for finance, or at least go ahead and succeed, is you want to have all this stuff lined up. I think you need a business plan, which I said before is kind of like your brochure. Your business model, you're tweaking it. How are you making money? There's lots of different ways to make money. So how does that work? And of course, my favorite is you have a couple of jets ready to go. So that's really the pitch in a nutshell for practical business planning for raising capital. And I've taken everything that I've learned along the way from 30 years worth of personal development workshops, and I put it to use in running my business. And I wrote about what worked, what didn't work, and how to use it, and what made sense, and some theory stuff, and just a lot of good stuff. And I wrote it into this book. And I think writing the book was more work than writing the software. But anyway, that's that. You've seen Business Black Belt before, and the last thing I'll leave you with is that Biz Plan Builder. I like to say at least 90% written for you, and it's got the financial models. I think right brain people can use it as well as left brain people can use it. And the real thing is you really got to make a case, and you have to understand your deal. You need to understand your business, where the value is, why it's worth $9 million, why an investor should give you $1 million, because what you're going to do is going to make it worth $100 million. And that's really where you're going with this thing. And my web address is jian.com. I have 3 minutes left. Nah.
You guys may have some questions. Burke, I was live streaming